Hello there and welcome to the Secrets of Organ Playing podcast. I'm your host, Vidas Pinkevicius. Today's guests are Johnston and John Apple, American organists from Michael's Music Service, a blog and a website dedicated to making old organ music live again. In this conversation, they will share their ideas about what it takes to restore, reprint, and distribute organ music, most of which is otherwise unavailable. Let's go to the show. I'm so delighted to finally meet you through audio conversation on Skype, Johnston and John Apple. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Vidas. Thank you for having us.
Yes, hello, John, too. It will be an inspiring conversation, I'm sure, because you gentlemen are so experienced in making old music live again, and I'm so eager to hear what you have to say about your work, about how you create this old music and recreate it in new ways, right? So for the beginning, let's start just a little bit in saying who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm Michael Johnston, and for many years I worked in all kinds of things like computer departments of insurance companies, but my training is music. I went to school at a little college called Mars Hill College in North Carolina mountains, and then I went to Westminster Choir College, which everybody knows in Princeton.
Yes,
I'm John Apple, and I am a graduate of Houghton College and a master's degree from Westminster Choir College in organ and church music. I'm a church musician, organist, choir director, and have had a great interest in music from the past.
Wonderful. And what is Michael's Music Service all about? What's the main goal of your operation?
Well, we started by taking music which had been abandoned by the publishers and trying to make it possible for other people to have it. This was years ago, before things like the Internet Music Library and the Sibley and the other free services had started. So here's basically what we do has changed a little bit, but what we do now is restore, reprint, and distribute organ music, most of which is otherwise unavailable. Our editions offer explanations of archaic terms, what I call a capsule biography, photos, and other interesting information that helps the performer to understand and present a musical and historically informed performance.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I noticed when I started my blog, Secrets of Organ Playing, and I started researching what other blogs are out there on the internet writing and talking about organ music and performance and organs. I came across your website, of course, and your blog, and I'm subscribed to this blog, and it's very curious that you provide these links to various snippets about organ-related ideas from the newspapers and magazines from all over the world. Wonderful.
I do try to find out things and present some interesting organs. For example, I've been hoping to see something about St. John's in Vilnius, and maybe some people would write about that. But so far, I haven't found anything. Maybe you could write an article about that for the local newspaper.
I'll see what I can find. Yeah, that would be a great idea, of course. It's worth writing, because it's, of course, the largest pipe organ in Lithuania. It has 3 manuals, 64 stops. It's all mechanical, so it's really.
I have a picture of you sitting at the console. It's on your site.
Great, thanks. It's tremendous fun to play this instrument, and especially at night with large reverberation.
Yes.
Well,
it's good.
so
Thank you for what you're doing in your blog, and I've noticed on the Secrets of Organ Playing podcast, you've had another blogger or two.
yeah, Michael Hammer recently. He is a blogger, and he writes not only about organ stuff, but because he is also the pianist and composer too. So he assimilates these all three fields into one experience, because he is also liturgical organist, and he writes so from his heart, and tells stories about his organ playing at church and how he connects with his congregation. It's really fun.
Great.
So tell us more about how you make old music live again.
Well, what I'll do is first off start off with a few definitions. And what we're doing today for the listeners of the podcast is this is the workshop that we present. Just assume that there's 50 people out in the assembly, and Vidas is going to be those 50 people, and he's going to stop me with questions just the way they do at the workshop.
Excellent.
So we'll start out with a few definitions. What exactly does it mean to restore, reprint, and distribute in the context of sheet music? Restore means to put it back the way it was, or the way it should have been originally. If a part of a measure is missing, I find the measure from another source and put it back. If there is an obvious accidental missing or other engraver error, I supply it. If the music has been copied and shrunk, I restore it to its original size on full-size paper. Reprint means to print the music again, this time on heavy acid-free paper that resists tearing and will not fall from the music rack like the 20-pound copy paper in your normal computer printer. Also, the reprint will match the appearance of the original engraved plates. Preserving this usually means fewer pages and more music on each page, meaning fewer page turns. It also means that if you do tear a page, you will need to go quite far into the paper to damage the music. The smaller outer margins used since World War II mean that the music notes are often damaged by the dog-earing and tears.
Distribute means to get the music out where organists can find it and see it and hopefully play it. We need to sell it to make money to get more of it available. This is the main difference between sell and distribute. We also send copies for review to encourage the younger organists who have never heard of much of this music to examine it and try it out. We also exhibit at conventions. I eagerly accept recordings to share with others, and dozens of these are available for free on our website. In some cases, I offer the music for free online to attract even more attention.
Why don't we just sell all the, why don't we all just download scans from Sibley Library or Library of Congress or Internet Sheet Music Library? This is discussion that people have all the time, but mostly the points are made without full knowledge of the facts. Much of our time will be spent on this subject. So, Vidas, do you have any questions on that introduction?
Of course, it's so exciting to hear you talk about how you restore, reprint, and distribute, right? But how about, can you tell us a little bit about the time period you work for the most part? Is it before World War II or even before World War I, or even 19th century music?
The music we restore is primarily from roughly 1850 until about World War II. Much of this music from these periods, especially in the United States, has not been taught to organ students in learning institutions especially since World War II, because the the music and the organs were considered to be not in fashion. So consequently, publishers let this music go out of print, and consequently, organists were not familiar with it.
Well, and also I tried, this is something that I do, because in schools in America, we generally are presented with European organ music. And to combat that, well, combat is maybe too strong a word. In order to try to make a balance for that, I tend to concentrate on American music, a music that was published in America, written by, at least in the beginning, Europeans who moved to America, but published here. And I try to do that. Some of it is on the Library of Congress, but you'd be surprised how many people don't know about it. They can't find it. They don't know how to print it. And in many cases, there are mistakes, really big mistakes, which we'll get into later. Things like treble clefs instead of bass clefs, incorrect key signatures, notes that are on the wrong spot. And we correct all of that in the reprints. One of the recent examples of that was the Payne Variations on America. John, tell them about that. We had to go to the Boston Library to find the original because the publisher, way back when, made a mistake.
John Knowles Payne, who was a late 19th, early 20th century composer, wrote in several organ pieces and had the first professorship of music in the United States. He wrote a set of variations approximately 1861-62 on the Star-Spangled Banner, and this was published by within about 10 years, but there was a discrepancy in the published version, just basically in one or two measures, that when getting access to a manuscript that is in the Boston Public Library, found that there was a significant difference. So we went back into the published version and changed that to correct it to what Payne's manuscript had in it.
Wonderful.
Yeah, what was presented in the published edition was, it resulted in a chord which you would never think Payne would have accepted. That's one of the ways you know that there's an error, when there's an obvious dissonance which is not resolved according to the style of the time. And it was really clear from the manuscript that the engraver, it simply made an error.
Fantastic story. Of course, Star-Spangled Banner is so important for entire country, but also for organists, because it's a really fun tune to improvise and to play. And I guess this Payne piece that you are talking about, if you can recreate it today and make it available, this is really, really useful for people.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So anyway, continuing on with the topic that so many people today, especially young people who deal with mobile phones as their primary computer, they don't really understand what is important about printing on sheets of real paper as opposed to PDFs and electronic scans. So I include this little bit. In December 2002, John Apple wrote this, and I put this on our website, and I'll show it to you now because a lot of people don't realize. He wrote, "It is of interest to note that since Warner Brothers, owned now by Time Warner, has acquired the Baldwin, H.W. Gray, etc. catalog, much of it has been discontinued." And keep in mind, this is in 2002. In fact, in comparing the catalog of 2000 to 2002, half of the organ music is gone from the catalog. I talked with an employee who stated that an organ piece must sell 200 copies per year in order to remain in print. I cannot imagine how many organ pieces can meet that number. The employee also said that they are not even keeping archive copies. This is really a tragedy when you consider that during the last 100 years, H.W. Gray published over 1,000 organ pieces in its St. Cecilia series, in addition to its contemporary series and other works. Most of the J. Fisher series is gone, and that is only the organ music. Much of the choral catalogs of these companies are out of print. What is being published in their names bears little resemblance to the older music. These companies will not continue to publish any sheet music as more people download for reduced prices or for free. Supporting a small company like ours can keep a few things available for a bit longer. And since John wrote that in 2002, the music controlled by Warner's has been passed around and now currently resides with Alfred. The passing around is an internet property or an intellectual property or IP catalog, and it presents only the control, not the actual music. They don't actually have the music. So if I have to apply for a license for Alfred for something from the H.W. Gray, they don't actually have the music. They can grant the license because they hold the control over the intellectual property. But it's up to me to find the music, restore it, and print it. All they do is collect the license. So, John, do you have any more comments on that?
So consequently, it makes it really difficult when people are trying to find pieces that were commonly available, and then suddenly, over the last several decades, they find that they cannot locate them. They'll contact the original publisher or their successor, and the publisher says, you can make a copy, or we'll grant you permission to make a copy, but you have to locate it. H.W. Gray was originally an independent publisher in New York City. This was from the early 20th century, roughly about 1905, until 1970. This was acquired at that time when the Gray family no longer wanted to have control and to lead that company. It was purchased by Bellin Mills, which itself had been a combination of Bellin Publishing and Mills Music Publishing. They've controlled this for 15, 20 years, and then Bellin Mills, which was based in Melville, New York, was purchased by Coca-Cola, and I believe subsequently Columbia Pictures. All of that merchandise moved to Florida, and in the process, there were many things that were lost in the packing and in the preservation and the shipping. So this music ended up in Florida. Then after a number of years, there were a couple of other owners that subsequently ended up out in California with Alfred. So every time there's been a transition from one owner to another, there has been actual music as well as any access to the music lost. So that you basically end up sifting out so much that becomes less and less available.
Mm-hmm. It's so sad. It's really sad that so much valuable and rare collections and music is not available anymore with these original publishers, right? And that's where you come in, right, Michael and John?
Yeah, because the other side of that, if you thought John maybe was joking when he said Coca-Cola owned it, no, organ music owned by Coca-Cola. It just is nonsense. But then again, Warner's, as in Jack Warner and the Warner Brothers, which is a big motion picture company, it doesn't make sense for them to own organ music either. These were simply corporate buys that they decided to do it, and then they decided, well, we need to sell it. So the other side of that whole picture is the demise of the music store. How many of us have had a music store that we used to go to, we'd buy our music, you'd send your piano student, you'd send your organ student, you'd send your violin student, you'd send them to the local music store to buy their music. Well, which music stores are around anymore? Mm-hmm. We've lost Padelson's in New York, nationally known. We've lost Frank Music. We've lost the great music stores and the small music stores, and the only thing left is online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the current state of affairs. I think that independent publishers and independent bookstores and across the board, not only in America but in Europe as well, they are disappearing bit by bit, I think, because of these global sellers like Amazon and others.
Yeah, and it gives a false sense of lasting. That is wrong for people to think. They don't understand, the young people especially, don't understand that just because it's on the internet in December of 2015 doesn't mean that it will be on the internet in December of 2016.
Yeah.
We saw that with the Warner Icking Library, which is a free download library. They just decided, well, we couldn't pay for it anymore, and it went off the internet. It's back now as a part of the Internet Sheet Music Library. But what happens if the university or the company or whoever is providing the service decides, well, we don't want to pay for the servers anymore? All of the music that was available online for free download goes away.
Mm-hmm. That's very, very tricky situation. I couldn't agree more, and so much of this fascinating and exciting music, which was living its life, and it was played at homes and in churches, right? A generation or two ago, it's now probably lost for many years, unless somebody like you can resurrect it again.
Well, the resurrection, John got a call from one of our customers in Georgia about something that you know, everybody thinks that it should be there. John, tell them about the story of the Sanctus. That was last month.
We had a customer from Georgia that was interested in playing on the organ the Sanctus from the St. Cecilia Mass of Charles Gounod. And she, of course, could not find anything that was available for this. And so she contacted us. I looked into what was published and found really only one old version of it from the 1890s that had been published by Arthur P. Schmidt in this country. And we made this available again recently within the last month. And she was very happy to have received quite a good transcription of the choral and orchestral parts into an organ version of this very popular piece. That people who know choral music especially, or love tenor soloists, will know this particular movement from this mass.
Yeah, I know this piece very well because just a few months ago I accompanied the choir and the soloists of the St. Cecilia Mass by Gounod on the largest mechanical organ in the world in Latvia, in Liepaja, and it was really fun. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, there again is something else that I love to see and talk with young people, but going to an organ convention is only one way of meeting them and talking to them. When you go to an organ convention, you're finding the people who already know. So you get an idea of, well, do they even know who Gounod was? Because the young people today are fed the music that they get from the it's not just the record companies, but it's all kinds of things. Television, they're basically fed music, and that never ever includes music from our classical history. So the idea that they're growing up without knowing, let's say the Verdi, the one of the pieces that was played over and over, be the Verdi, the great march from Aida. How about Wagner? Wagner was all over the place years ago, and today the only thing the younger people seem to know is the Valkyries. Mm-hmm. And all of the other things, just Wagner, who, what, they don't hear it, and unless they're curious enough to go look for it, who wants to play a transcription of something that nobody recognizes?
Yeah, I agree, and little by little, the range of opportunities for younger generation is diminishing, right? You get to play only the most popular music, right? The Bach toccata, Widor toccata, and the similar pieces, and your repertoire sort of diminishes daily, or at least in time, and that's a pity, because there is so much, 7 centuries of organ music, right? From about 1400s or even 1300s, written, published manuscripts available today, but not too many people know about it.
When you consider that in the John Henderson Dictionary of organ music, he has over 10,000 composers who have written for the organ. Most people do not realize this. And a small fraction of this is what actually over the last 150 years has been taught in our music schools, and a very great sifting, shall we say, of what is considered most important. And if as an organist you simply restrict yourself to that highly winnowed version of organ literature, you really come up with a very small number of pieces that you hear over and over and over again, which are great works, but there are other pieces too. We've also, in studying music in general, we're taught about the innovators, the composers who made innovations in composition, which leaves out a lot of composers who really wrote good music, sometimes fun music, that really were not innovative. And this is what we've tried to do in bringing back some of this music from especially the middle of the 19th century up through World War II, because the organ had a great following, especially before the period of radio and television and recordings, and it is able to provide a great variety. One of the reasons that I've discovered when I was in graduate school was that a lot of this music was not talked about at all, the instruments as well. They were just considered to be something that were passé. But I discovered that in looking at this music, you really can challenge yourself as a musician to be more creative. If you think of yourself as an orchestral conductor or as a composer for orchestra, that how can I bring out various things about the music through my instrument that are not simply putting on a group of stops and playing from beginning to end, but that actually you are challenging yourself to think more orchestrally, and therefore are going to be challenged to be able to play the notes, the right rhythms, to have creative registrations and the use of the mechanics of the organ you have available, which may be greater than what was actually put on the page by the original composer or arranger. And this music provides a vehicle by which you can become more creative in your musicianship.
Absolutely, I agree, John. If you have this large body of repertoire, and you're constantly playing seldom played music, right? Your experience, your musical intuition is so expanded, I think, and develops at a much greater level, because you are into these distant musical realms, I think. it's very, very important to play variety of styles and variety of national schools and variety of historical periods, I think, too.
Well, we're talking about history, and that's certainly one of my interests, but my early training in music began with 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
Before I studied Beethoven and Mozart, I studied Stravinsky, Britten, Bernstein. So I grew up with and understood contemporary music. One of the things that's so sad is contemporary music for the organ is all but gone. During the Neo-Baroque, the people played basically the Bach and his friends, and then everything that followed it was so highly dissonant that it turned off people. And today, only a handful of people are writing, and none of the big companies is publishing. We're down to, John? Morningstar, Concordia. What are the companies now? None of the great big companies are publishing much of anything, and none of them include organ music.
It's very rare to see an American company that will invest the time and effort to creating sheet music for the organ, much less maintaining it.
Wayne Leopold does a great job with music, but it's not generally brand new music. The hardest sell in the world is getting a publisher to take on a brand new piece of music. For the most part, the new music that is published is based on a hymn tune or some other tune that the congregation could conceivably recognize, and it's generally very simple and technically not of the highest quality.
Yeah, you're mentioning a very important idea here, Michael and John. This diminishing number of music publishers who would risk the idea of publishing the new and original repertoire not based on pre-existing choral melodies or hymn melodies. And do you think that it's because of lack of interest from the listeners' part, or do they fear that there are some other factors at work here?
Well, John can speak to the listeners, but I'll say from the publishing standpoint, we just had the announcement and distribution of a brand new Bach edition.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've had Bach editions from one to another, to another, to another, and now we have a beautiful but expensive brand new Bach edition with supposedly the best scholarship. And while that's really very good, and it's great that it's going to be interest in Bach, do we really need to have another Bach edition, which if you buy the whole thing would be hundreds of dollars? The same thing is true with listening to the radio. If you listen to a classical music station, you're going to hear Bach, and you're going to hear Mozart, and you're going to hear Beethoven. You're going to hear the same people over and over again. So from the presentation point, it is really, I think people are scared. I really think the publishers are just scared. They're going to get 500 copies of a piece that's written, it's brand new, and it's going to sit there and nobody's going to buy it. I think that's what they're scared of. So they stick with Bach or John. Isn't there a new? Wasn't there a couple of years ago? There's a beautiful edition from Paris of René. Tell us the René Vierne, and it was beautiful. But René Vierne at least is an unknown, as opposed to J.S. Bach, who is pretty much at the top of the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
This small French publisher has published a number of editions, and we tried to obtain this and found that they had printed a certain number and it had run out, and they had really no active plan for reprinting more of it. So this was the brother of Louis Vierne, who died in World War I, and he produced a small body of organ pieces, which have largely not been available. And so consequently, here's an edition that, quote, is available, but yet it's not.
I came to find out that the reason that it was so difficult to work with their company is that their company was pretty much wholly funded by the French Culture Authority, that they received money to do their beautiful edition, and very well done, but they received the money to do that from the French Cultural Authority. So they really didn't have an interest in selling it because they got paid.
The music that you end up hearing, if we end up looking at performances of music up until into the 19th century, the late 19th century, consisted of music that was new, that there was really not much of an interest in old music. When we look at the music of Bach, which the complete edition began in 1850 and finished in, I believe, 1899 or 1900, that it was rare to really have performances and interest on the part of performers and audiences for old music. But as more and more interest began with resurrecting older music, we've come more and more in our performances, particularly of live music, to have more interest in music that is by dead composers than by living composers. And that if you attend an orchestral concert, for example, you might have a 10-minute piece that's by a living composer, maybe at the beginning of the program, not at the end of the program. And so consequently, the whole aspect of the importance of music from our own time has been completely reversed to give an importance to the past and not the present.
Yes, that's the great shift of ideas happening in our age, because everybody wants to play classics, right? And not only these classics from the 17th century or 15th century or the 16th century, but 18th century, the great Baroque music, perhaps a little bit of romantic music, but mostly very popular music, right? Mendelssohn and Schumann and probably Brahms and Franck. A little bit of Vierne if they can manage the technical pieces, and of course the Widor. Other than that, it's very rare to find with general population among organists, not too professional, that they would have interest in playing anything modern or even avant-garde, So
Yeah, that reminds me of something. One of the things I love to mention when I send out my announcements is how many composers that are on the list that you just mentioned, how many of the classical types, the ones that are played all the time, were actually organists. Let John, give them a few and see if you think it's organist or non-organist.
Gabriel Fauré.
Of course.
Organist or
Organist.
non-organist?
Organist.
How about Elgar?
Oh, Elgar should have been organist, I think, too.
Yes, he was.
Uh-huh.
Um, Beethoven.
He certainly played organ, yeah, definitely.
In fact, he called the organist the greatest of virtuosos.
Uh-huh.
Camille Saint-Saëns.
Definitely organist, yeah.
Franz Liszt.
Absolutely, yeah. At one point, he played at Schwerin Cathedral in with Ladegast organ. Yeah, he was an organist too.
So we go on, and there are a few of them who are not. Bruckner, for example,
Absolutely, organist too, yeah. And Mozart, if we continue, Mendelssohn,
Yes.
right? Let's Chopin too, and many other classically trained composers that we cherish today as symphonic or opera composers.
Yes.
They started out and acted as organists for many years.
Yes, Leo Delibes, the ballet
Yeah.
composer, was an organist.
Yeah. Exactly. And lots of French composers too, because they had this strong institute for the blind youth, you remember, and lots of blind musicians started to play organ there in Paris. And one was Verne, of course, and another was Gaston Litez, and from the later period, of course, and lots of French people who couldn't see, they were blind, either born blind or became blind later on from illnesses. They were taught playing the organ, So the organ was and is still a very important, at least should be very important instrument in their education.
Even Claude Debussy had some identity with the organ. There is a fugue he wrote when he was at the Paris Conservatory.
Also Brahms.
Absolutely, Brahms, together with Schumann and Clara Wieck. Remember this wife of Robert Schumann? They formed a circle of friends, basically three friends getting together and studying counterpoint and music of Bach and playing the organ too.
Yes, this is really quite amazing when you look at how many composers throughout the last at least 500 years, many of them had some type of training in their musical training and identity with the organ.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we need that. But unfortunately, organ departments are closing.
Yeah.
Here in the United States, we've lost organ departments, and sometimes they're folded into performing arts with an organ division, but then sometimes they just close it altogether.
When I finished my doctorate degree studies at University of Nebraska-Lincoln with Professor Quentin Faulkner and George Ritchie, they both retired after I and my wife Oshra left. The same year, two full-time professors retired, organ professors retired, and instead of two professors, they hired one half-time organ professor who have to teach organ part-time, and another part-time was music theory classes he taught. A wonderful musician, by the way, an organist, and Christopher Marx is his name. So basically the whole organ department got smaller and smaller by the day.
what I find is even at places such as the University of Michigan, that was near where I grew up, that had Marilyn Mason, Robert Glasgow, and Robert Clark, along with one or two other people who assisted back in the 70s and the 80s. And now that Marilyn Mason has retired after the longest career probably as a professor in a university, that the department has become less. And the music school, I'm told, they're dealing more with music and dance, not simply a school of music. So there's a whole shift in the administration's viewpoint as to what the prominence of the performance of music is, and that has an effect consequently on the organ as a performing instrument.
Yeah, and some of the organs that have been built in this country, you may speak to this for Europe. I don't know what it is in Europe, but in this country, we tend to view the orchestral or the auditorium municipal organ as a showcase. It's there to show we have money, or the family that donates it has money, or look, it's really pretty. And we end up with a grand organ that sits there and isn't played. The orchestra doesn't use it. There's no concerts. There's no recitals. It just sits there. Look at Verizon Hall. Mm-hmm. It's used roughly once a year. Look at the great auditorium organs that, for the most part, just sit there. Exactly. And they're not used.
And even university organ halls, right? Concert halls.
Yeah.
The same is with them. Most of the university concert halls have organs installed in previous generations, probably, but they give organ concerts very seldom.
How often is the organ at St. John's used?
For the most part, every Saturday.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, not every Saturday, but at least a few times a month. We have a solid spot for the organ and other music concert and recitals on Saturday evening, 6 p.m. So whenever we have the possibility, we play the organ there.
What is the audience number approximately that comes to an organ concert there?
It depends who is playing, you see. It depends who the audience knows, because throughout the years that I'm working, I think since 2007 there, and coordinate these concert series there and try to promote the organ there. And it depends who is playing, you know. If my organ music fans don't know the performer, then it would be my responsibility, of course, to make this organist trustworthy and remarkable enough so that they would come. But it depends, really. Sometimes the better job the organist does in promotion of herself or himself, making trust, keeping the trust level high between his fans or her fans, then it pays off. You know, there are social media networks you can follow and promote, and blogs and video YouTube channels. Not too many people do this, but who invest the time and effort, is over time it becomes a very good asset.
Yes.
Well, there was an article that was written by Gordon Balk Nevin back in the 1920s. He's one of the composers that we publish and is known for his piece Will o' the Wisp. He wrote this article that says that you really should emphasize having your local performers for the very reasons you were talking about, that if it's somebody the people know in the region, that it's very good to have your local performers to perform programs, because you'll more than likely get a bigger audience than for those you may pay a lot more money for to come in from outside.
Exactly. You know, in about 2009 or 10, I believe, we had a concert organ recital given by Guy Beauvais, the famous Swiss organist. And he, of course, is one of the few most famous living organists in the world. So I had the privilege of organizing this concert in our church, St. John's Church, and I was lucky to get a little bit of advertisement on TV, national TV network.
Excellent.
And you know, the church was packed and everything was packed because I advertised him as the living legend, or sort of like the most famous living organist in the world. Basically, this was my tagline, or the promotional idea, and that worked actually. Of course, you know, there are other very famous organists in the world, but Guy Beauvais is certainly among them. Thank you so much, Michael and John, for caring. And would you please tell our listeners across the globe where they can find you and your work online?
Everything is at michaelsmusicservice.com. The music, the free audio files, the blog, everything is there, michaelsmusicservice.com. We're also on Facebook, if that matters, and I'm on Twitter. I have people all over the world who talk organ on Twitter.
Yeah, wonderful. So I'll make sure to include all these links into our conversation, and I wish you great success with resurrecting old music and giving it a second chance.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Musical examples for today's conversation were taken from michaelsmusicservice.com, and you can find much more information about the composers, even free MP3s, scores from that website. Make sure you visit their blog and subscribe to it, and their wonderful and interesting organ music links from all over the world will come to your email inbox. This conversation continues in part 2. We will meet Michael and John next Sunday. Stay tuned. If you liked this conversation, I encourage you to visit my blog Secrets of Organ Playing at organduo.lt, where you will find lots of insights, practical advice, and training for every area of organ playing. You can subscribe to this blog for free to get your daily dose of inspiration and to be the first to know when any of my future podcasts roll out. I hope to help you reach your dreams in organ playing. I'm Vidas Pinkevicius. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you online really soon.